Hello, everybody. My name is Nkosi, and welcome to the Two Sides of a Coin podcast. And this episode is going to be a little different. Mostly, when I come on here, I'm talking about things that happened in pop culture or talking about things that happen in movies. And because this is my show, I just wanted to try something a little different. And that is, I wanted to talk about another passion that I have, and that's sports, specifically the sport baseball. I love me some baseball. I am a Yankee fan, grew up in the Bronx. You don't need to be a Yankee fan if you grow up in the Bronx, but it is so heavily encouraged. And I remember when I was little, I used to be taken to a lot of Mets games because my dad didn't like me being a Yankee fan. He wanted me to be a Mets fan because he thought the Yankees just they outspend everybody there. They don't win the right way, even though he could never really define what the right way meant. So I used to go to a lot of Mets games when I was younger, and the big thing with the Mets was one, they would lose, and number two, the fans knew they were going to lose even before the first pitch. It was a very cynical fan base. Even today, the Mets are still a cynical fan base. So whenever I would go to a Yankee game, I'd always not only feel like the team could win, it felt like the fans felt the team could win. So it was always really fun. It was electric, and I fell in love with the team ever since. But this episode is not going to be just about my love for the Yankees. This is going to be an idea that I've had for a little bit, and that is because of the new rules that Major League Baseball has implemented. And if you don't know the new rules that Major League Baseball has implemented, this year they've made the most definitive and distinctive change in their rules in probably their history. They've instituted a pitch clock, which means that the pitcher needs to throw the ball to the catcher and to the hitter within 15 seconds if nobody is on base, 20 seconds if somebody is on base. They've limited the amount of pickoffs. They've limited defensive shifting. They've increased the size of the bases. It's a lot of changes that I feel have been wildly successful. It's led to a game that I used to remember when I was a kid, instead of it being the three expected outcomes from the past couple of years. And if you don't know the three expected outcomes, it was usually strikeout, fly out, home run. So there's a lot more hitting, there's a lot more stolen bases, and I love it because it shows how athletic these baseball players really are. But there's also been some moves going on. One of the biggest moves, in fact, being the Oakland Athletics are moving their team from Oakland to Las Vegas, and it has been contentious, to say the least. Oakland Athletics fans have hated it because they've been considered not only a bad team because they just aren't willing to spend the amount of money needed to make and field a competitive team. It's also because the stadium is out of date and it's needed an update, and ownership has just failed in every capacity to make a competitive product in Oakland, even though they have a fan base that I think many believe would go to those games if it was a good competitive team, especially since baseball tickets are the cheapest of any major sport across the board. Cheaper than baseball, cheaper than basketball, cheaper than football, cheaper than hockey or soccer. You name it, baseball tickets are generally on average cheaper than it. So I thought with Oakland leaving for Las Vegas, I thought it would be a nice little fun experiment. What would happen if we had to reorganize the league. And the reason why I'm saying reorganize the league is simple. Baseball is looking to expand the number of teams that it has. They're actively looking to add a team in another country. Mexico is one of the big ones that's been floated around recently. Also, if they add one team in Mexico, because there are currently 30 MLB teams, if unless they move one team from its current place and put it in a different place, they would have to add another team back into the league in order to balance it out. So I wanted to do a little thought experiment and see what the league would look like if we had to add two more teams and we rebalance the league. So, as I said, this is all just my personal opinion. If you don't like rivalries not being around and everything like that, please leave a comment. I would love to hear where you guys stand on it. So, let's lay down the ground rules for the reorganization. I think they're very simple. Number one, since we're adding two teams, there are 30 teams, so that means there are 32 teams overall with these two additional. We're going to have to add a completely new division to baseball. Baseball has three divisions normally, the West, Central, and East, and we are going to add a proper South division. Because we are adding a proper South division, each division is going to have 4 teams. So that means there will be 4 divisions in each league, 8 divisions total. If you're familiar with football, then you know exactly what I'm talking about here, or basketball, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. So my divisions are mostly going to be centered around preserving as much as you can from the original leagues, from those original divisions, while also keeping it geographically coherent. Remember, most teams, the most games you're going to play are going to be within your division. So it makes no sense for you to have a division where you have to travel an excessively long amount of time or have a division mate that's halfway across the country, simply because if you do that, it's going to make things really, really tough. All right. So let's start off with the National League. And we're going to start off with the NL East. Now, in my opinion, the NL East isn't going to get a lot of changes. The original National League East are the Braves, the Marlins, the Mets, the Phillies, and the Nationals. So, since we're going to keep teams, or since the max cap on each division in this new format is going to be 4, we're going to keep the Mets, the Phillies, and the Nationals together. And the reason we're going to keep the Mets, Phillies, and Nationals together is because geographically, as I said before, all 3 of these teams are fairly close. They all are within less than a couple of hours of travel, less than 2 hours by plane. And it's going to make it easier, especially to play those interdivision matchups. However, am I going to keep the Marlins or the Braves? Well, remember, the Marlins are in Miami. So we have the Mets who are in New York, we have the Phillies who are in Philadelphia, and we have the Nationals who are in DC. So you could see how quick and how much time you'd spend traveling between just those 3 cities. Why would I throw in the Marlins who are all the way down in Florida? And why would I throw the Braves who are in Atlanta? So obviously those 2 teams, they're out of the new NL East. Instead, I'm going to add a team that's going to be really close to the Phillies, and that's the Pittsburgh Pirates. So instead of going from New York to Miami to Atlanta to Washington to Philadelphia, now we're going from New York to Philadelphia to DC to Pittsburgh. So you have that nice little slice of the country right there, all congregated amongst each other. And the great thing about keeping division games close is you build the animosity higher. There is so much animosity when you have either crosstown rivals or when you have rivals that are close to each other geographically. So I'm not going to put the Mets and the Yankees in the same division simply because while it would breed much crosstown rivalry, it's going to limit the chance that we're going to have a crosstown World Series, which I feel at all times we should try and keep. So that's why, spoiler alert for later on, the Cubs and the White Sox are still going to be in two different leagues. The Mets and the Yankees still going to be in two different leagues because to not have that crosstown rivalry is going to be important. All right? So, let's move on. We're going to go now to the NL Central, the new NL Central. And there, we're mostly going to keep 4 of the 5 teams from the NL Central. So that means we're keeping the Brewers, we're keeping the Reds, we're keeping the Cubs, and we're keeping the Cardinals. All these teams are already pretty well laid out geographically. So we don't need to necessarily worry about these teams, you know, meeting up and these teams not having the proper chemistry. These teams are all fairly close to each other. They already have that chemistry. It doesn't make any sense to move a team from a different division or a different league and move them into it when they're already there. So that means, sadly, the Reds, they're going to be in there, the Cubs, the Brewers, and the Cardinals. But we had to move the Pirates over to the East in order to make, I think, the two leagues stronger overall by keeping them close. Now that we've talked about the NL Central, we're going to talk about probably my most divisive new division that I've created, which will be the NL South. And the reason why this division will be so divisive is because I'm not only adding in a brand new team in this division, I am also taking an NL team out of this not only division, I'm taking them out of this conference. And I'm going to swap places with another American League team. But I hope you'll see why in a second. So this league, the NL South, will take the 2 teams that were left over from the NL East. So the Atlanta Braves and the Miami Marlins are going to be in this division. I'm also planning for the new team, hopefully the team that's going to be in Mexico City, or if they move it somewhere else, I'm planning on putting that team in the NL South simply because I don't think we're going to get another team in Canada. So I'm putting that new expansion team here. And the 4th team I'm adding is going to be the Texas Rangers. Now, the Rangers are regularly a team that's in the American League. However, as I've already said, I want to not only build crosstown rivals, in all instances, I want to preserve the idea that you could have a World Series in one state. It it brings so many opportunities that you can't have anywhere else when you are able to have a World Series in one state. It is magical. I was a Yankees fan during the Subway Series World Series between the Yankees and the Mets. That was incredible. And I think any way that you can preserve that to put 2 teams that are in the same state on the big show, I think you should. So I'm taking the Rangers and I'm putting them in the National League, which I think will make the National League as a whole actually stronger. And I'm taking the Diamondbacks and I'm putting them in the American League. So this is my most changed division as a whole. Also, I'm going to moving on to the NL South. Here, it's not going to be as strict or as crazy in terms of the changes, but there will be some pretty decent changes. So, we're keeping the Dodgers, the Giants, and the Padres in the NL West, and we're also going to keep the Rockies. So, you see there for the NL West, we have all three of these teams that are in California. California has the biggest amount of teams in general. I mean, it's insane how many teams are in California. I mean, looking at it, we have 3 California teams in this division, and we still have more California teams that are going to be in this division in the American League. So California's populous. We want to keep those teams obviously in the NL South. Adding the Colorado Rockies there, they're naturally in the NL West, so we're going to keep all them in the NL West for this instance. So now we're done with the National League. And let's go over to the American League. And here, they're not going to be a lot of huge changes simply because the American League was already pretty regionalized before. However, there will be some new changes. So let's start with the AL East, or the AL Beast as I call it. I already told you I'm a Yankee fan. You don't like it, ask somebody else. Don't come for me. So we're going to keep the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Orioles, and the Blue Jays all in the AL East. They're already fairly close to each other in terms of geography, and that division is still going to be strong. I am taking away a little bit from it by putting the Rays out, but hear me out here. And if you are a Rays fan, I need you to hear me out. This will probably be one of the few times I say something positive about the Tampa Bay Rays. So hear me out. The Tampa Bay Rays are a strong team, and they've been a strong team for years. If I'm going to build a new AL South, a new division, I'm going to want at least 1 or 2 teams that are going to be the kings of that new division. And there's no better team that I could select based off the geography than the Tampa Bay Rays. So this isn't hate against the Rays franchise. This is appreciation of how damn good the Tampa Bay Rays are in terms of playing baseball. They deserve to be kings of a division, not necessarily the division I play in, but if I'm making a new AL South, then they deserve to be one of the kings in that division. Plus, the AL East traditionally is super log jammed as well. So let's take one of those strong teams and move them over to make the other divisions in the American League a lot stronger. So going now to the AL Central, we're now going to put the Guardians, the White Sox, the Twins, and the Tigers. And we're going to put those out of here, and we're going to leave the Royals out of this traditional division. Now, as I said, you have Cleveland, you have Chicago, you have Minnesota, and you have Detroit. Those are all fairly close to each other already. So just the odd one out is Kansas City. That's fine. This league is still going to be, this division is still going to be fairly strong, as well as we are preserving that White Sox Cubs World Series idea. As I said, White Sox and Cubs being in the World Series, amazing. So much anger and so much hate put in one place for at least 4 games, you couldn't script anything better than that. So let's keep that ideal and let's move on to the AL South, which is going to be the most changed division, and it's actually going to be the most spanning division in terms of geography. But I'll tell you why. So, as I said, you already know in the AL South, I'm putting the Rays. Tampa Bay, they're so far removed from the rest of the AL East, so they're the odd ones out. I'm moving them into the AL South. Who else is going to be in the AL South are the Royals, the Astros, and the Arizona Diamondbacks. Now, as I said, this is going to be the most spread out division that I've created. All the other divisions have been really small and concise in terms of their travel time. Meanwhile, the AL South is really spread out. I mean, you have Florida, then you have Missouri, because I'm pulling them from Florida to Missouri. Then I have them going to Texas. That's not that bad. And then I have them going to Arizona. So this division is going way across in terms of time zones. This is really the only division I've made where they're crossing multiple time zones, not just one, but 2 time zones in this division. And honestly, the reason why I did this is because originally I did have it where I had the Astros and the Rangers in the same division. And I changed that from one simple reason. And that is I still want to reserve and to protect cross-town or cross-state rivalries. It doesn't make any sense to me that the only 2 teams in Texas are in the same division. They should be not only in 2 different divisions, they should be in 2 different leagues. So I was going to move the Rangers and the Astros, and they're not going to be in the same division. Now, you could make the case that I moved the Diamondbacks out of the division. Maybe I could have moved a team like the Royals out of their division and put them in place. Or maybe I could have, from the South, maybe I could have moved the Braves from there in the NL South and moved them into the AL South. And here is my honest opinion on that. I want these divisions to still be traditionally strong. I want them to have at least 1 or 2 teams that are strong. And if I'm going to do that, the Diamondbacks, while they're a good team, traditionally they're not a strong team. And the Rangers are a good team. Traditionally, they're not a strong team because they have to split themselves in the AL Central, which, as we know, or in the AL West, which, as we know, has the Astros, the Angels, the Athletics, and the Mariners. So I'm going to take a really strong team, or at least a stronger team in terms of the Rangers. I'm going to move them to the National League South, preserve the idea of getting a Rangers-Astros World Series, which I think fans in Texas would absolutely love. They would love the idea of having an all-Texas World Series. I could hear so many people just saying, the stars at night are big and bright deep in the heart of Texas, and screaming that from the rooftops by getting the idea that the Rangers versus the Astros for the World Series. So while it is a little bit more spread out, I think the NL South is buoyed by the fact that that's going to have another international team, and international travel is always a little bit more tedious than just traveling across the country. So the AL South will be the most stretched out division, but I do think it's balanced. However, I am willing to hear you guys come to me with what you think would be a better AL South configuration. So finally, we have the AL West, and the AL West is generally going to stay the same with one caveat. So obviously, you're going to keep the Angels and the Mariners. They're going to stay in the American League West. Also, the Oakland Athletics, which are moving to Las Vegas. I don't know what their new name is going to be or if they're going to keep their name. Honestly, if they're going to move to a different city, I think it would be better to just do a clean break and to name them something different in Las Vegas. So I'm going to keep the Las Vegas team in the American League West. Although it would be a really interesting thing to figure out what their new name would be when they move. I mean, I hope it wouldn't be something so on the nose like the Las Vegas Gamblers or something like that, or the Las Vegas Loan Sharks. That would be hilarious though if they did, but that's not going to happen. So Las Vegas, LA, and Seattle are all going to be in the AL West. And my fourth team, as I said, if I'm going to add teams, I'm going to bring one back, and I'm going to bring the Oakland A's and put a team, a new expansion team in Oakland with a new stadium. I know it's petty. However, I do think that pettiness would lead to amazing stuff on the baseball side. You already have the fan base from people who were Oakland Athletics fans. And I don't know if a lot of Oakland Athletics fans are going to move over and become these Las Vegas fans. So if you instead just made a new Oakland Athletics team with a new stadium, I think you would reabsorb a lot of those previous Oakland Athletics fans that might drop off from the bad blood that's happened with this Oakland A's move. And we get to build a brand new market in Vegas, because Vegas is the next great frontier in terms of sports teams. You already have an NFL team in Las Vegas with the Raiders, and that's been pretty good. So I think if you are in the NBA, you're going to put a team in Las Vegas, and you know Las Vegas will campaign hard for it. Also, if you are a baseball team, you know, hey, can we put our baseball team in Las Vegas? Las Vegas has already approved it. So I well and truly believe that this is a move that can not only work, it can work incredibly well. It's going to bring fans into the city. Las Vegas will be buoyed by another sports franchise, which will bring money into the Las Vegas slash Paradise area, and I think it's just a no-brainer in that regard. So let's do my final thoughts in regards to this reorganization. I think as a whole, this keeps as much of the identity of the previous three divisions together, while also building new rivalries between different teams. I think it helps geographically, albeit except for the AL South. However, in my mind, with the AL South, you got to remember that's really the newest division where none of those teams were even in the same division. So with the Diamondbacks, they were in a different league altogether. So I truly think it would build a lot of it would build new rivalries, which I love. Also, it would go out of its way to keep everything as tight as possible while also bringing in new fans, new rivalries, and old rivalries back from the dead. So, this is just my idea of what a reorganization of baseball would be with two additional teams. And I really want to hear what you guys have to say. I really want to hear if you guys are even okay with the idea of me talking a little bit more about sports. So definitely let me know in the comments or in email or anything like that if you agree with my sports takes, if you feel vehemently strongly against them, or if you just say, hey, I think you should stick to movies and pop culture. Or maybe you'll say, hey, I want you to do more. I don't know. I would love to hear from you guys to tell me what you all think. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode. If you want to reach out to me, you can find me in several places. You can contact me on Twitter at Two Sides Coin. You can find us on Instagram at Two Sides of a Coin. That's TWOSIDEZ of a coin, all one word. You can email us at twosidespodcast@gmail.com. And you can listen to the podcast on Podbean, on Spotify, and also on Apple Podcasts. So we hope to really hear from you guys. I love to hear and discuss anything you guys want to talk about, and we'll talk to you later.